No, no buzz. The Chesapeake's Book Club. Um, Probably a short one. I read Joan of Arc by Michelet, a name I definitely did not know how to pronounce before I looked it up. This is technically a chapter out of Michelet's History of France. It's written, I believe, in 1838-ish. This is a translation from 18. This is a translation from 58, so it was maybe 1830 when the History of France came out initially. And yeah, it's an old ass translation. I wonder if you can catch it. You see that? It's a little fun thing right there. See that? Uh, Univ of California. There. That's actually like stamped through the page, like it's hole punched. I guess it happens again somewhere in the middle of the book. Yeah, I have had positive feelings about Joan of Arc ever since 2007-ish, when I, in one particular class, read, I think this is one class, it might have been two different classes, or two of the same courses, from Professor Karen Yamashita, who actually got to see recently give a talk about the Anthropocene, which was quite good. I took a class from her multiple times over the course of a few years, and in at least one of them, maybe two of them, I read first maybe the single most impactful book in my entire life. What one might refer to as one's favorite, depending on how one talks about these things. Um, uh, Dictee by Teresa Hawkins Cha. There are significant portions of that experimental novel are engaged with Joan of Arc, and it's a book I desperately need to reread because, like, God, reading that book for the first time absolutely broke me apart and reformed me into a more competent sort of how do you say facsimile of a human being. And then I also read, if I'm misremembering this, then I apologize, but I'm pretty sure this is true of both of them. Uh, Maxine Hong Kingston's Woman Warrior, a memoir of subtitle, a memoir of a girlhood among ghosts, not a memoir, as you may have encountered me talking about here. One of the things I learned from those classes is how much the sort of memoir ghetto is a real thing, where authors of authors who are people of culture get pressured into framing even their novels as memoir to present to, in addition to other pressures, often with Asian American literature, is pressure of the story of assimilation. I came from a war torn country. It's a don't ask who started the war, or whatever, to find opportunity in America, and my first generation gets to write how they assimilated. Second generation gets to write how their assimilation has caused them, identity issues that can be resolved by the end. That sort of thing is the reason I'm not calling out any books here or anything, is because I don't think any authors in particular write like this. I think this is a pressure from publishing houses that still extremely exists. But yeah, I believe the protagonist of Woman Warrior is also sort of engaged with, along with the Fa Milan sort of myth, the bits about Joan of Arc, and so I have had a generally positive. Oh, there's the other very obvious one. Otto Theodore Dreiser, I believe. Jeanne d'Arc, the silent film, is one of the most striking pieces of filmmaking I've ever seen. Something that's one I'm like, I don't even know if I want to go back to it, because it's just very emotionally affecting and slow and beautiful. But yeah, those three media objects, all dismissive as fuck, whatever. Talking about, like, maybe my favorite book of all time, one of the most important and one of the most important pieces of Asian American literature of all time, and one of the classics of film. They're all media to me because we're on YouTube. That is the platform effect. Have all led to me being sort of interested in Joan of Arc, but never really like doing the research. And so I found this little green book, and I accidentally put it in my bag when I meant to put a green book in my bag, and then I read the book. And now I know what the 100 Years' War is. Not really. I kind of do. I now know that the 100 Years' War is a war between France and England, where England, Britain, whatever, still don't know the exact definitions of those things. The UK versus Britain versus Great Britain versus England. I think England is the correct thing to say there, given the historical time period, which I now know is the late 1300s to the early 1500s, basically, of that 100 Years' War. Which is to say, late Middle Ages? ? I'm not a historian. Extremely not a historian, and I'm extremely not a historian with dates. Joan of Arc is, a girl who lives to be about 20-ish, sort of the early 1400s, early to mid 1400s. And my understanding, having read this and done a little bit of side research, and then having not recorded this video for a number of weeks, for a number of reasons, she, is born in this small town. I guess d'Arc is just her paternal last name. I did not realize that, I don't think, ever before. She's what is the term that she's repeatedly referred to in here? Pucelle, la Pucelle. It's the thing, the Virgin, I guess, but specifically, it just comes to mean Joan of Arc, basically. La Pucelle is sort of a nickname, and Joan of Arc, or Jeanne d'Arc, is her real name, or her real name. Fuck a real name. It's early mid 1400s. She's born to a sort of not particularly well-off family, finds a calling from God, and travels to basically confirm that she will see the inauguration of Charles V. And this is important because basically France and England are both trying to crown a king in a way that would legitimate their sort of nation-building goals. And then, like, large scale, from my understanding, both from this book and from subsequent research, is like the 100 Years' War was basically a massive sort of nation building series of conflicts. It is sort of the thing that forms both France and England as the nations that they are. It gives it's a way of producing national identity, of bounding what we now have as the sort of the boundaries of the states, the borders, as you might say. And Joan of Arc is a pivotal figure in this, both in terms of providing a sort of a legend or a myth making aspect, right? This young girl dresses as a man and fights off the invading British, kicks them off the sort of out of incurring further into the sort of like main body of Europe, setting them up to be pushed back to their rainy little fascist island, and doing so, in the name of God, and producing a king in the process. That seems to be the long and short of it. Reading this was interesting. I guess Michelet is sort of one of the early examples of sort of narrative history, I guess. I think a lot of folks were like deeply influenced by his histories. There was other background stuff I remember looking up, but I didn't write any of it down, so it's gone. There's just one specific thing I wanted to sort of talk about, for maybe obvious reasons. but yeah, it was interesting. Before I get to that, there's the funniest bit of this book is like toward the end, Michelet just starts going hard about like the essential character of the British and just being like fuck those clowns basically, which I thought was extremely funny. While also acknowledging that again, this is part of that process of identifying a national identity or constructing a national identity, even in opposition. National identities are constructed like many identities, in opposition as much as in affirmation. Constitutively, one might say, even in opposition. And the fact that that project itself is a terrible, terrible thing. It leads to borders, for instance. Um, you know, the fucking score. Um, it was still funny to read and just be like, these fucking pasty British motherfuckers. These fucking whiny ass British. It's a fun thing to read people shit talking from the 16th century or whatever. But yeah, there's this bit after La Pucelle has been captured and is being like interrogated before being burned at the stake, where they sort of talk about why she dresses in men's clothes and how much of a true problem this was. And I'm just going to read a bit from the Michelet. It is clear she shrank, though modest. It is clear she shrank through modesty from explaining herself. The poor girl durst not explain her position in prison or the constant danger she was in. The truth is that 3 soldiers slept in her room. Footnote: 5 Englishmen, 3 of whom stayed at night in her room. 3 of the brigand ruffians called Uspilia, I don't know, which is to worry like a dog, hence the name. That she was chained to a beam by a large iron chain. Footnote: quote, she slept with double chains around her limbs and closely fastened to a chain traversing the foot of her bed, attached to a large piece of wood 5 or 6 feet long, and padlocked so that she could not stir from the place. Another witness states, there was an iron beam to keep her straight. So that she was chained to a beam by a large iron chain, almost wholly at their mercy. The man's dress they wished to compel her to discontinue was all her safeguard. Long ellipsis. What are we to think of the horrible imbecility of the judge, or of his horrible connivance? So this is all to say that Michelet is sort of positing here that one of the reasons that Joan of Arc refuses to dress according to her gender, according to her sex, I guess, is the possibility of assault, like straight up and down. Which is interesting to me. In part because I think it's not terrible historiography necessarily. Like I think there's something to be said about that that inference that is not does not strike me as immediately and obviously wrong. That she takes up a sort of masculine dress, which is to say things like pants as opposed to dresses or skirts, coincides with her going to lead an army and being sort of the only woman amongst men, and that there might be, in addition to potential other desires for one, or other ways of asserting social ranks, things like that, might be very clear concerns, and it's again, to speak to the nation building aspect of both this book and the story it tells. It's extremely sort of obvious that Michelet only brings this up when she is in captivity of the British, rather than considering that this maybe not incorrect assumption that she is in part wearing men's clothes to protect herself, and specifically her virginity, which is like a very important thing in her sort of religious, I guess, both belief and utility. That she does not bring that up in the case of when she's with the Frenchman, because Michelet is French, right? He's doing a history of France, again, building a nation. There's another bit in there. I guess I'm not going to be able to find it. Where he also talks about other motivations that she might have had for wearing men's clothes, and I guess I'm just not going to get there. But this is the trans thing is always tough, right? To express. Even, whatever. We're good. It was just really interesting to sort of dig into Joan of Arc in a way that was like a sort of a jaunty narrative version of the history that actually like taught me a couple things less than it probably wanted to. And that sort of left these sort of open holes for me to keep sort of worrying at, and maybe coming back to at some point in the future, or maybe not. Who knows? I don't tend to read a lot of histories that aren't explicitly Marxist. Anyway, Joan of Arc's cool. And it was interesting to read like a really old history text. I've never really done that before. Hey, thanks for not watching.